Truth is, the highway talks if you know how to listen. Some nights it hums easy, like a loyal old dog. But when I rolled up to that Wyoming way station, the whole stretch of asphalt went quiet, like something hiding in the dark didn't want to be disturbed. The sodium lights above the scale flickered in a sickly yellow glow, stretching my shadow clear across the concrete. Then the inspector stepped out, boots crunching, badge gleaming, eyes cold as a winter bridge deck. He circled my rig, slow, deliberate, like a man rehearsing a lie he'd told 100 times. And before I could even roll down the window, he whispered that I was already out of compliance. If you're into raw, unfiltered stories that peel back what really happens out here on America's backroads, make sure you subscribe. This channel's where the truth doesn't stay buried. I've dealt with bad weather, bad breaks, and bad luck, but I'd never faced a man who looked at me like he was already counting the cash he planned to squeeze out of my hide. When he leaned closer, his face half lit in the glow from my dash, he hinted my CDL might not survive the night unless I cooperated. Then he walked toward that crooked little shack, windows boarded, camera hanging by a wire, his hand dipping under the counter for something he clearly didn't want inspected. I heard the faint click of metal, the kind that chills a man right through his work gloves, and the moment I realized what he was pulling out, that's when everything turned deadly fast. I've always said the highway's got a way of reading your soul if you let it. I've spent most of my life behind the wheel of a rumbling diesel beast, chasing sunrise across deserts and fighting thunderstorms in the Midwest. And over time, the road starts talking to you. Not with words, more like pressure changes in your gut, subtle things you learn to trust more than people. That night, as I eased Lucille down the worn Wyoming asphalt, I knew something was wrong long before I saw the way station lights. I'd been at this long enough that the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was suspicious. The air felt thick, like the darkness was hiding something just out of my headlights. Even Lucille seemed uneasy, her engine humming a little rough, a little higher, like she wanted to warn me but didn't have the words. I'd just climbed a long grade and was coasting easy, trying to keep my mind focused after 12 hours behind the wheel. My thermos was empty, my eyes were burning, and my shoulders ached from bracing through wind gusts earlier. The GPS pinged a reminder. Mandatory way station ahead. Normally I'd groan, mutter a curse, maybe slap the steering wheel and laugh at my luck, but that night I just felt watched. The station appeared like an abandoned outpost in a horror flick, perched low in a valley where the highway dipped, half hidden in shadow. The old sodium lights cast a weak yellow glow that flickered against the cold breeze, making everything look like it was underwater. The sign said "Open" in big red letters, but the letters kept fading, almost like someone wasn't paying the electric bill. I slowed down because the law says you gotta, but something in my stomach twisted tighter the closer I got. The digital scale readout flickered like a dying heartbeat. I rolled onto the platform, listening to the metal groan beneath Lucille's weight. Then the numbers on the screen flashed, jittered, and went dark. For a moment, the only sound was the idle of my engine and the wind scraping across the empty lot. The screen came back on, then died, then came back, then died again. I frowned. Scales glitch sometimes. Equipment gets old, wiring corrodes, calibration goes off. But this felt intentional, like someone was messing with the circuitry on purpose. I leaned out the window to check the booth. There was a blacked-out Crown Vic parked crooked near the shack, like whoever drove it didn't care about rules or lines. That told me plenty. People who park like that either own everything around them, or think they do. The booth door opened slow, and a man stepped out like he'd been waiting for me. Tall, wiry, boots scuffed but polished on the toes, hat pulled low enough to hide most of his forehead. His jacket looked like state-issued winter gear, but the patch was half torn off, hanging by a single thread. He approached with the steady, prideful swagger of a man who liked his authority more than he liked doing the job. As he came into the flickering floodlight, I caught the details of his face, cheekbones sharp enough to cut rope, eyes grey and cold like wet gravel, deep lines around his mouth that weren't from smiling, more like from scowling at people who didn't move fast enough. He stopped right under my window, didn't bother to look at my tires, my load straps, nothing. Didn't ask about my documents, didn't greet me, didn't pretend to care. He opened his mouth and spoke like he was reading a script he'd used 1,000 times to scare men twice my size. "Evening," he said, though his tone didn't match the word. "Evening," I replied, trying not to sound as tired as I felt. "How's things?" "Not great for you," he answered without blinking. No pause, no explanation. Just a cold slap to the face. He tapped his citation pad with one gloved finger. "You're already out of compliance." The frustration hit my chest like a sharp exhale. "Sir, I haven't even—" He cut me off with a raised hand, the kind of gesture a school principal gives a kid caught smoking behind the gym. "Save it," he growled. "Violations like yours. Well, some folks never recover. CDL suspensions, fines, whole career gone." He delivered it casually like he was reciting a weather report. My jaw tightened, but I forced calm. "Can you tell me what violation you're seeing?" He smirked, the kind of smirk bullies get when they feel untouchable. "Step out of the vehicle." I hesitated, not out of fear, but because my instincts were screaming. Something about the whole scene felt staged, like the darkness had teeth. Still, refusing would only feed his ego. I unbuckled, stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. The cold bit through my jacket, but adrenaline kept me warm. He motioned me toward the shadows on the side of the shack where the wind couldn't reach. The lights flickered above us, buzzing like angry wasps. I noticed the security camera hanging by a single screw, lens cracked, wires exposed, dead, useless, convenient. He leaned in, breath sour with stale coffee. "Look," he said, lowering his voice like he was doing me a favor. "We do things a certain way here. You grease the wheels, a little cash, nothing big, and I don't have to report this violation. You drive away, everyone's happy." My stomach turned, not from fear, just pure disgust. "I don't pay bribes," I said quietly. He chuckled, an ugly, raspy sound. "You'd be surprised what scared drivers do when their whole livelihood's on the line." He angled his body closer, voice dropping. "Your CDL might not survive the night otherwise." The words echoed in my head like a diesel engine misfiring. He was pushing the exact button he thought would break me. My CDL isn't just laminated plastic. It's my entire life, my mortgage, my kids' medical bills, my truck insurance, my food, everything. Threaten that, and you're not just pressuring a driver. You're cornering a man with nothing to lose. But I kept my voice steady. "My truck is clean. My logs are clean. I know I'm good." "None of that matters if I say it doesn't," he snapped. That told me everything. He wasn't just some crooked small-time inspector milking the occasional rookie. He was protected, confident, arrogant, and I had wandered into his private feeding ground like a deer with a limp. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" I asked, crossing my arms. He listed imaginary violations like he was reading off a lunch menu. Overweight on axle 3, breakout of adjustment, possible falsified logs. My blood boiled. My brakes had passed a shop inspection 2 hours earlier. My logs were digital and synced, and the scale wasn't even on when he claimed the axle weight. He expected panic. Instead, I gave him the smallest, most aggravating smile I could muster. "Do you have calibrated scale data to prove it?" That wiped the smirk right off his face. His jaw twitched, barely noticeable, but enough to tell me he wasn't used to being questioned. "No driver asked that," he muttered. "I ain't most drivers," I said. His nostrils flared. He spun on his heel and marched to the shack. He threw the door open and jerked his head for me to follow. Inside, the shack smelled like dust, old coffee, sweat, and forgotten rules. The overhead bulbs buzzed a dim yellow, casting more shadow than light. Papers covered the windows, taped up haphazardly, making the place feel like a bunker instead of a state facility. Two old monitors sat on a desk, both dark. A third monitor flickered with static. Filing cabinets blocked half the room, dented and rusted. A radio crackled with dead air. He pointed at a metal chair, the kind used in bad interrogation rooms in movies. "Sit." I stayed standing. "That wasn't a suggestion," he snapped. "And I didn't hear it as one," I replied. He stared at me long enough to make the room feel smaller. Then, slowly, his hand slid under the counter. I heard a faint click, metal against metal, something you only notice if you've spent time around tools, locks, or weapons. His hand came back up, not with a citation pad, but with a small digital recorder. He pressed play. Static filled the room at first. Then a trembling voice broke through. "I paid. Please. I can't lose my license." My stomach dropped. A driver. Someone scared. Someone who gave in. He paused the recording and looked at me with a predator's smile. "You're next." My fists clenched. That recorder wasn't evidence. It was bait. A trap to break the spirit of any driver who stood in this exact room. He stepped closer, clearly expecting fear. But fear wasn't what he found in me. What he didn't know was that I wasn't walking into his trap empty-handed. I had something on me, something he hadn't counted on, something that would flip the entire situation on its head. And as I reached into my jacket, his eyes went wide. He took a step back. "Don't do anything stupid," he warned. "Oh, trust me," I said softly. "Stupid ain't what I'm about to do." Because in my pocket, I had something that was about to change everything. Something that would turn this little shack into the last place he ever expected to lose control. And the moment I pulled it out, his face drained pale as moonlight. What I pulled from my jacket wasn't a weapon, though for a moment the inspector sure reacted like it was. His eyes widened, shoulders tensing, hand hovering near his belt like he expected steel in mine and had to think twice about reaching for his own. But what I slid out was something he didn't know how to handle, something more dangerous to him than any blade or bullet could have been. It was a small black square with a single red LED, no bigger than a matchbox. A voice-activated micro-recorder. A trucker's best friend on bad nights. A tiny insurance policy I'd gotten used to carrying after 27 years of dealing with everything from bad dispatchers to lying shippers to roadside arguments that could go sideways fast. I held it between two fingers, letting him get a good look at it. He blinked once, twice, the realization hitting him like a slow-moving freight train. His face tightened. "What's that supposed to be?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady but failing. I flicked the tiny switch with my thumb, and the LED glowed a soft red. "It's been recording since I stepped out of my truck," I said calmly. "Everything you said, every threat, every fake violation." The inspector's jaw clenched, and he took a half step toward me, then stopped, rethinking the move. In the cramped space of that shack, with the buzzing fluorescent lights and the stale smell of forgotten authority, the power shifted. I felt it, and more importantly, he felt it too. "Turn that off," he said. It was meant to be a command, but it came out like a plea. "Why?" I asked. "Afraid someone might hear how you run this place?" His mouth twitched, the mask slipping. Then he regained a sliver of his arrogance and pointed to the boarded-up window. "No cameras work in here," he snapped. "No audio feeds. Nobody's going to believe you." "Funny," I said, "because drivers been talking. I've heard stories about this station, about you. Rumors travel fast on the road." His nostrils flared. "Rumors aren't proof. That's why I brought this." He swallowed, throat bobbing. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out how to control something he suddenly didn't control anymore. Everything about him screamed, a man used to intimidation, working instantly, used to drivers folding in minutes, handing over cash or begging for mercy. But I wasn't shaking, I wasn't sweating, and that scared him deeper than anything else. He gestured toward the recorder. "Give that here." "Not a chance." "You're interfering with a state inspection," he growled, stepping closer again. "That's an arrestable—" So is extortion, I cut in. He froze. Not the whole body, just his confidence. His eyes darted to the door, then to the recorder, then to me. He wasn't sure whether to posture, bluff, run, or fight. The silence stretched tight between us. He exhaled sharply, like a man trying to calm himself. Then he forced a thin smile. "We can work something out," he said, sliding into a greasy tone. "No need to escalate. You delete that recording, and I'll clear your violations myself. You'll drive out of here clean as a whistle." "I am clean," I said. "You just didn't expect me to be prepared." His smile vanished. He leaned close, breath bitter with cheap coffee. "You think that little toy's gonna save you?" "I know it is," I replied. "'Cause here's the thing. You're not the first dirty officer I've ever run into. But you're the first one dumb enough to threaten my CDL before I even stepped on the scale." His eye twitched. "Watch your mouth." "Why?" I asked. "You gonna write me up for that too?" His teeth ground together. I could see his patience fracturing. He wasn't used to being mocked, wasn't used to being challenged, and certainly wasn't used to being outplayed in his own den. He jabbed a finger toward me. "Give me the recorder, or you're not leaving here tonight." I almost laughed. "That's supposed to scare me?" "It should," he said quietly, too quietly. And for the first time, a chill crawled up my spine. Because something in that voice didn't sound like bluster, it sounded like intent. Not the kind you bluff with, the kind you act on. That shack suddenly felt smaller, the air felt thinner, and my instincts, they started screaming. The inspector took a step backward, toward the far corner of the shack, where a big metal cabinet sat. It was dented, rusted, its paint peeling like sunburned skin. He put a hand on the handle. "I'll give you one last chance," he said softly, oddly calm. "Put the recorder on the desk. Walk out. Forget tonight ever happened. And if I don't, then things get complicated." "Complicated how?" His eyes darkened. "You really want to find out?" I looked him dead in the face. "Yeah," I said. "I do." He pulled the cabinet open, and that's when I felt my whole chest go cold. Inside wasn't paperwork, or tools, or inspection gear. It was a small metal lockbox with a keypad. He punched in a code so fast and practiced it might as well have been muscle memory. The box clicked open. He reached inside. "Don't," I warned. "You don't want to do that." He ignored me. His hand disappeared into the box. I tensed, ready to move, ready to react. Then he pulled something out. Not a gun, not a knife. Something worse for a man in my position. A stack of blank citation sheets with pre-signed state officer signatures. All dated, all stamped, all ready to be filled in. A whole damn library of ghost tickets. Fraud, systemic practiced fraud. Enough to bury any driver he wanted. Enough to bury me 10 times over. He held them like trophies. "See," he said, "I don't need you to be guilty. I just need to write it." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. He flipped through the stack. Overweight, brake failure, falsified logs, reckless operation. "You pick. I can ruin your whole life faster than you can get back to that truck." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "That's what this is about," I murmured. "Money, control." "No," he hissed. "It's about power." He snapped the box shut, tossed the stack on the table and stepped toward me again. "Now hand me the recorder." I didn't. Couldn't. He wasn't bluffing anymore. This was a man who'd been doing this for years, maybe decades. A man who believed he owned this way station, owned this stretch of road, owned the fate of every trucker who passed through. And I realized something else. I wasn't just dealing with a corrupt inspector. I was dealing with a predator, the kind that doesn't stop until someone stops him. He took another step. I backed up, slow and deliberate, keeping my eyes on his hands. The recorder stayed in my grip, LED still glowing. "I'm walking out of here," I said, "and you're not stopping me." He laughed, actually laughed. It sounded like sandpaper rubbing metal. "This shack doesn't have working cameras," he said. "This station doesn't have witnesses. Drivers disappear on paper all the time. You think anyone's going to come looking for you?" His words hit me harder than a fist, not because they scared me, but because they were too confident, too rehearsed, too practiced. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't an impulsive shakedown. This was routine. He'd done this to men who probably never said a word afterward. Men who paid, men who feared losing their license more than losing their pride, men who left broken, men who left quiet. Not me, not tonight. I edged toward the door, maintaining eye contact, calculating distance, angle, obstacles. He noticed. "Don't," he snapped. "I'm leaving," I said, "and if you step in my way, you're gonna regret it." He lunged. His hand shot forward, reaching for the recorder. I sidestepped, but he clipped my arm, sending the device skidding across the floor. It slid under the desk, bumping against the wall with a faint crack. His face lit up with triumph. "There it is," he sneered. He dropped to one knee, reaching for it. That was his mistake. Because while he was focused on grabbing my recorder, he forgot something important. A man with his knees on the ground doesn't move fast when things turn. And I turned things. I shoved the heavy filing cabinet with my shoulder, using every ounce of strength I had. It scraped forward. Not much, just an inch or two, but enough to slam the desk into him, enough to pin his arm between metal and wood, enough to make him yelp in shock. He jerked back, stumbling to his feet, clutching his forearm. "You son of a—" "Stay back," I warned. He didn't listen. He swung at me, not a clean punch, more like a wild, angry swipe meant to intimidate. I blocked it with my forearm, pain shooting down my elbow. But I didn't back down. I didn't give him the satisfaction. And that threw him off more than anything else. "You just assaulted an officer," he spat. "You just tried to extort me." I shot back. "What you gonna do? Write me up for fighting back?" His lip curled. He started pacing, eyes darting around the room, mind scrambling for leverage. "You think you can leave? You think drivers who resist get to just walk out?" I stared him down. "Try me." He reached the door first and planted himself in front of it, blocking the exit. "You're not leaving until I say so." "Move," I said. "No." "Then you're making this harder than it needs to be. This is your last warning," he snapped. "Turn around, sit down, give me the recorder, and maybe you'll walk out of here with your license." "What if I don't?" His eyes hardened. "Then you won't walk out at all." For a moment, even in that tiny shack, with the wind rattling the taped-up windows and the buzzing lights flickering above, everything went perfectly still. A dangerous stillness. A stillness where decisions get made that you can't come back from. I shifted my weight, not enough for him to notice, but enough to prepare. He smirked like he thought he had me cornered. "I warned you," he said quietly. "I gave you chances." "No," I replied. "You gave me proof." His eyebrows pulled together. "Proof of what?" I reached slowly into my jacket again, and he tensed like he expected I'd pull something deadly. And in a way, I did. Because what I pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was my phone, screen already lit, camera already rolling, microphone already hot, recording every word. His face drained so fast it was like watching a man bleed out without a wound. You think I only brought one recorder?" I asked quietly. "You think truckers survive as long as I have by being stupid?" His mouth opened, but no sound came out. And in that silence, in that tiny shack on a forgotten Wyoming backroad, I saw everything. The truth of him, the fear, the guilt, the realization that he'd finally picked the wrong man on the wrong night. I stepped toward him, slow, steady, unshaking. "Now move," I said, "or this whole recording goes straight to the state dot before sunrise." He didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. For the first time that night, he was the one frozen. I pushed the door open myself. The cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of diesel, frost, and freedom. But just as I stepped across the threshold, just as I thought the worst of it was behind me, I heard something behind me, a sound that made my blood run cold, the unmistakable click of a weapon being cocked, and the inspector's voice trembling with anger, desperation, and something far darker. "You're not going anywhere." The sound of that hammer clicking back froze me harder than the Wyoming wind ever could. It sliced through the night like a razor, sharp and full of bad promises. I didn't turn around right away. Not because I was scared to look, but because I wanted to feel the moment, wanted to let him show just how far he was willing to go now that his little empire was crumbling under him. The gravel crunched behind me as he took one step out of the shack, the overhead floodlight flickering above us and throwing his shadow across the pavement like some stretched-out monster. I slowly raised my hands halfway, not surrendering, just letting him know I wasn't making sudden moves. No sense giving a cornered predator an excuse. "You pull that trigger," I said quietly, "and you'll lose more than your job." He exhaled sharply through his nose, a puff of white vapor drifting past me. "You think I won't? I know you shouldn't." I finally turned my head, just enough to see him in my peripheral vision. The gun wasn't aimed at my back yet, but it was hanging low in his right hand, a state-issued sidearm, which meant he wasn't just corrupt, he was dangerous. The inspector's jaw trembled, whether from cold or rage, I couldn't tell. "You weren't supposed to fight me," he said. "Drivers don't fight me." "Well," I muttered, "looks like you finally met one who does." He stepped closer, boots crunching in slow, deliberate steps. I could hear the metal shaking in his grip, just a little, but enough to show he wasn't as steady as he wanted to appear. His world was spinning out from under him, and he was reaching for the only kind of control he had left, the violent kind. "You walk out of here with that recording," he whispered, "and everything I built is gone." "That's the idea," I replied. "You built it on ruining people, on fear." His breathing grew heavier. "You don't know anything about what I deal with. The rules, the quotas, the inspections, the people who come through here thinking they can lie to me. This place taught me to take control because nobody else will." "There's a line," I said softly, "and you crossed it a long time ago." He lifted the gun just an inch, enough to make a point, enough to make my heart thud once, heavy as a dropped wrench. I kept my voice steady. "There's another rig coming down the highway. I hear the rumble. They see you holding that gun on me. No amount of lying is going to save you." He hesitated, looked toward the road, and for a split second, uncertainty cracked through his armor. I took that moment and stepped further out into the open lot, away from the shack, away from the killing box he wanted me in. The highway stretched ahead, a strip of black ribbon under a nearly moonless sky. A set of faint headlights shimmered miles off. "Put the gun down," I said. "Walk away. Pretend you never saw me. It's the only break you're gonna get." He didn't lower it, but he didn't raise it either. His voice softened, but not in kindness, more like he was thinking out loud. "You drivers, you don't understand. They don't care about us. The state doesn't care. The department doesn't care. Staffing cuts, impossible quotas, constant audits. And while they ignore us, they expect us to keep this road safe. So I adapted. By extorting people?" He glared. "By doing what I had to do." I shook my head. "You're not some misunderstood hero. You're a man who found a way to squeeze desperate people and convinced yourself it was justice." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, cheeks flushed with frustration. His hand shook a little harder now. "Last chance," I said. "Put it down." For a long, breathless moment, the night held still. The wind paused. Even the floodlights above stopped flickering, as if waiting to see how this all would fall. Then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. A low, broken sound. "You think I'm afraid of you? You think you can walk away from this? Drivers disappear from records all the time. Tickets lost, citations buried, accidents unreported. Nobody questions this little corner of Wyoming. Nobody looks twice at me." I stepped fully into the open lot, hands still raised. "They will now." "Why? Because of your phone?" "I smashed that and it's done." "Because someone's coming," I said. "Right now. Look behind you." He turned his head instinctively, just a fraction, just enough to let me inch farther from him. The headlights I'd seen earlier were closer now, bouncing slightly as a truck approached the station entrance. He cursed under his breath. "You're not screwing this up for me," he snapped. He aimed the gun at me, not a warning, not a threat, a decision. And that's when the incoming truck honked, a loud, blaring horn that rattled the thin metal siding of the shack. The inspector flinched, just for a moment, but it was enough for me to move. I twisted sideways and dropped low as he fired. The shot cracked through the night like lightning, the muzzle flashed bright against the darkness. The round hit somewhere behind me, ricocheting off metal with a spark. I dashed behind one of the concrete-filled barriers near the scale platform, heart pounding in my throat. Gravel sprayed under my boots as I slid into cover. He fired again. This time wild, angry, desperate. A bullet pinged off the barrier inches from my shoulder. The truck that was pulling in screeched to a halt. I could hear the driver shouting something, but the adrenaline in my bloodstream drowned the words. All I focused on was the rapid crunch of the inspector's boots, closing in fast. "You can't hide," he yelled. I thought, actually, I can, and more importantly, I can buy time. But time wasn't on his side now. The big rig's engine revved, headlights sweeping across the lot. The driver threw open his door, boots thumping down as he stepped out. He shouted, "Hey, what the hell is going on?" The inspector whipped around toward him. "Stay back. Official business." But his voice cracked. His authority was threadbare now, and the driver knew it. "Why'd you fire a gun?" The trucker yelled, voice thick with outrage. "Back in your truck," the inspector commanded. But the man didn't budge. Instead, he swung the door shut and started toward us. The inspector panicked. I heard him reload or try to, the shaky sound of a magazine slapped against metal. I couldn't let him turn his madness toward the new driver. I rose from behind the barrier and shouted, "He's corrupt. He tried to extort me. He's been doing it for years." The driver froze, staring at the inspector, uncertainty warring with fear in his eyes. "Don't listen to him," the inspector barked. "He attacked me. He's resisting arrest." "Then why'd you shoot?" the driver asked. That question, it hit the inspector harder than any punch could have. He snapped. He spun toward me again, gun raised. I didn't wait to be a target. I bolted for Lucille, legs pumping, gravel spraying under each stride. He fired again, another crack, another spark off metal. The bullet hit my truck's front fender with a metallic thud that made my heart lurch. I dove behind the driver's side wheel well. Lucille's steel body shielded me. The inspector kept firing, reckless, furious shots that echoed through the empty way station, like thunder rolling across the plains. The other trucker yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" The inspector ignored him entirely. Then, silence. I didn't know if he was reloading, repositioning, or creeping closer. But I knew one thing. Part 2 was only just beginning. And the inspector, the man who thought he owned this stretch of Wyoming, had just crossed a line he couldn't come back from. And I was going to make damn sure he paid for every inch of it. The silence after gunfire is the worst kind there is. Your ears ring, your pulse slams against your ribs, and the world seems to hold its breath like it's waiting to see who moves first. I pressed my back against Lucille's wheel well, feeling the cold steel of the hub through my jacket. The air smelled of burnt powder and diesel, two scents you never want mixed. Every instinct in me said to stay down, but I could hear the inspector's boots shifting on the concrete. Slow, careful, hunting. The other driver, God bless him, was trying to make sense of what he'd just seen. "Officer," he called out shakily. "Put the gun down. Man, this ain't right. You're shooting at an unarmed. Back in your truck," the inspector snapped, voice cracking with rage. "Now." The trucker didn't move. He was a big guy from what I could tell by his silhouette. Wide shoulders, heavy boots, the kind of man used to wrestling loads twice his size. But even big men freeze when bullets start flying, and I couldn't blame him. This wasn't his battle. He just happened to roll into the wrong station at the wrong moment. The inspector pivoted slightly, pointing his gun toward the newcomer, and something primal surged through me. This wasn't just about my CDL anymore. This man was a danger to anyone who crossed his corrupt little kingdom. I raised my voice from behind the fender. "Hey!" I shouted. "Over here!" The inspector spun back toward me, gun arm jerking, finger tightening on the trigger. Exactly what I wanted. I reached underneath Lucille, grabbed a fist-sized chunk of gravel, and lobbed it across the pavement. It clattered on the far side of the scale platform like footsteps running toward the dark. He fired immediately, 2 rapid shots toward the sound, both wide, both desperate. That bought me the second I needed. I crawled low, moving fast along Lucille's side until I reached the passenger door. My heart hammered loud enough I swore he'd hear it. I yanked on the handle, slipped inside the cab and slammed the door behind me. I kept the lights off. Darkness was safer. Lucille's cab felt like stepping into a church, safe, familiar, quiet. My phone was still in my pocket, still recording, still glowing faintly. I forced my breathing steady. My hands trembled, but I needed them solid, needed them ready. Outside, the inspector screamed, "Come out! You hear me? Come out before someone gets hurt!" Someone, not me specifically, someone, that told me something important. He wasn't in control anymore. The gun had become his crutch, not his weapon. The other trucker yelled from behind his rig, "Put it down, man! Stop shooting!" "Shut up!" the inspector barked. "You don't know what's happening here." I considered starting Lucille up, flooring it, and ending this whole mess by knocking the inspector flat. But the mechanics of that thought fell apart as soon as I imagined what the aftermath would look like. Dashcam footage from the wrong angle, a crooked officer's word against mine, a scene that could be twisted into me using my truck as a weapon. No, not yet. I needed proof. More proof. Undeniable proof. And the inspector was giving it to me with every bullet he fired. I lowered the window an inch and whispered into my phone. "Wyoming State Patrol. Emergency. Shots fired. Way station off Highway 287. Officer is out of control." I didn't know if the signal would hold. It was a dead zone out here more often than not. But I sent the message anyway. Even if it didn't go through, it would time-stamp my intent. My recording would show it. Every step I was taking was for survival, not violence. A sudden metallic bang hit Lucille's passenger side door, hard enough to rock the cab. Then another. The inspector was hitting the truck, maybe with his boot, maybe with the butt of his gun. "Get out!" he screamed. "Get out now!" I stayed perfectly still. He couldn't see me, couldn't predict me, and unpredictability is the one thing bullies never know how to fight. He pounded again, breathing hard. "You think you're gonna ruin me? You think you can walk out of here after what you pulled?" I said nothing. Then his tone shifted, slowly, dangerously, to something calmer. "You bring that recorder out here. You hand it to me. We can end all this. No more shots, no more problems. You can drive away, clean slate." "You shoot at me," I said through the cracked window. "And now you want me to hand you evidence?" "Driver," he said, voice cold as an oil slick. "You don't understand the situation you're in." "I understand enough," I replied. He slammed his fist against the window, but didn't fire again. That meant one of two things. Either he was thinking, or he was out of ammo. Both options worked for me. Then I heard fast, heavy footsteps, running. Not toward me, toward the other driver. "Hey!" the trucker yelled. "Back off!" I risked a glance through the windshield. The inspector grabbed the trucker by the jacket and shoved him against the side of his cab. "Give me your phone," he snarled. "Now!" "So you can shoot me too," the trucker spat. "I said give it to me." He raised the gun again. Third time that night, but this time something was off. It wasn't aimed right, his grip was sloppy, his arm trembled, and the other driver stood his ground, not fearless, just fed up. "Put it down!" the trucker growled. "Or I swear!" The inspector shoved him harder. "Give me your—" I'd seen enough. I burst out of Lucille's passenger door, boots hitting the cold pavement hard. "Hey!" I roared. "You want a phone? Here!" Both of them turned toward me, the trucker in shock, the inspector in fury. I held up my phone high, the recording still rolling. The inspector's eyes locked onto it like a starving man spotting food. He shoved the trucker aside and charged at me with the kind of blind rage that burns a life down. He never saw the second driver's reaction. The trucker, recovering from being thrown, grabbed the inspector's arm just as he aimed the gun at me. It threw off his balance, and the two of them collided hard into the side of the way station wall. "Drop the gun!" the trucker yelled. "Let go of me!" the inspector snapped back. The gun clattered to the ground. The sound of metal hitting concrete brought a strange stillness to the lot, like the entire night paused to listen. I kicked the weapon away with one strong sweep of my boot, sending it skittering across the pavement into the dark beyond the scale platform. The inspector let out a furious roar and pushed himself free from the trucker. He charged at me again, and for the second time that night I felt that primal surge, the calm that happens when danger peaks. He swung, a wild, wide arc. I ducked under it, grabbed his jacket, and twisted with everything I had. His momentum carried him forward, slamming him onto the ground so hard the air burst out of him in a painful grunt. He flailed, trying to grab my legs, but I kept my weight centered, pinning him with my knee and holding his wrist down. "Get off me!" he shouted. "No," I said breathlessly, "not this time." The other trucker ran up, angry and out of breath. "You good?" "Hold his arms," I said. "Don't let him move." Between the two of us, the inspector couldn't so much as lift his shoulders. His face twisted with hatred. "You're assaulting an officer. This is recorded," I interrupted. "All of it." He froze, and in that one moment, finally, his eyes changed. The rage didn't vanish, but fear took its seat beside it. Real fear. The kind a guilty man feels when the walls start closing in. "That phone," he whispered. "Give it to me." I leaned down just enough for him to see the truth in my eyes. "No," I said. "You're done here." He thrashed uselessly. "You don't understand. There are people above me. This goes deeper. You're going to make a mistake coming after me." "Good," I said, "because I'm done letting people like you make mistakes for the rest of us." He stared at me, breathing shallow, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "You're dead," he hissed. "Both of you. Dead." The other driver leaned in close and said, "Buddy, you lost that hand the moment you pulled the trigger." He wasn't wrong, because in the distance, far off at first, came a sound I'd been hoping for ever since the first shot rang out. Sirens, getting closer. And the inspector realized, too late, that his little kingdom was collapsing under the weight of truth he never thought anyone would dare bring into the light. The inspector heard those sirens before anyone else reacted, and the way his eyes widened, it was like watching a wild animal realize the trap finally closed. He stopped thrashing, stopped barking threats, stopped trying to yank free from our grip. His breath hitched in a strange, shaky way, half shock, half rage, like he couldn't believe someone had dared to drag the truth into his territory. "You idiots," he whispered, voice cracking. "You idiots don't know what you've done." The other trucker kept his weight on the man's arm, using both hands now, jaw clenched tight. "Buddy, we saved our damn lives, far as I can tell." "You don't understand," the inspector hissed. "You're making enemies you can't even see. They don't care about the truth. They care about order, chain of command. I'm protected." "Not anymore," I said quietly. "Not after tonight." He twisted his neck to look up at me. In the pale, shaky light of the flickering flood lamp, he looked different now, less like a man, more like a cornered snake trying to decide whether to strike or play dead. "You think those officers pulling up are here to help you?" he growled. "You think they'll believe some trucker over a state inspector?" "I think they'll believe the recordings," I said. "You think they haven't seen recordings before?" He spat. "You think evidence can't disappear? Computers crash, cameras glitch, files go missing, and people who make the wrong accusations get flagged as hostile reporters, blacklisted, investigated. That's supposed to scare me?" I asked. "It should," he whispered, "because it's all real." The sirens grew louder, ricocheting off the metal siding of the shack and echoing through the empty lot. Red and blue lights washed across the pavement, skating over Lucille's chrome and casting shifting shadows across the three of us. The other trucker muttered, "Finally," but he didn't relax his grip on the inspector. I didn't either. Not until I saw how this was about to play out. 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt. Officers jumped out, hands not on their weapons but near them, scanning the area with tight eyes. One pointed a flashlight straight at us. "Hands where we can see 'em!" he shouted. I immediately lifted mine. The other trucker lifted his too, still keeping an elbow on the inspector so the man couldn't bolt. The inspector found his voice again, a desperate scream. "Officer down! Officer attacked! They assaulted me! They stole my weapon!" The accusation ripped across the lot like a violent crack. The officers reacted instantly, guns drawn, beams aimed at us like spotlights hunting escapees. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The other driver froze too. The inspector twisted his head toward the officers, playing the victim to perfection. "They tried to kill me. They're resisting arrest. They're armed." I wanted to break his jaw for that lie alone, but I didn't move. I slowly reached 2 fingers into my chest pocket, staying as smooth as a man moving through thick mud. "Officers," I called out. "I have a recording, 2, in fact. It captures every—" "Stop moving!" one of them barked. I froze again. The other trucker cleared his throat. "Tell them! Quiet!" Another officer snapped. That moment felt like trying to balance a full tanker across a sheet of ice. One wrong twitch, and the entire situation would explode. The inspector groaned theatrically, like he'd been beaten half to death instead of just pinned. "They ambushed me. They threatened me. I fired warning shots." "Warning shots?" The other trucker muttered under his breath. "Is that what we're calling attempted murder now?" I shot him a quick look, one that silently begged him to keep it together. One of the officers approached carefully, gun still raised. "Step away from him now!" We both backed up slowly. As soon as we moved, the inspector scrambled to his knees with alarming speed, faster than he'd moved all night. He reached toward the direction he'd thrown his gun. "Don't move!" the nearest officer shouted at him, but the inspector didn't listen. He pointed toward me instead. He took my weapon and threw it, somewhere near the platform. He was trying to hide it. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, jaw tensing. The officer swung toward me again. "Sir, shut your mouth." Anger crawled up my spine, but I didn't say another word. Not yet, not until I had leverage. Another patrol car pulled in. Not racing, not lights blaring, just rolling in slow like someone who knew the scene they were stepping into. The door opened and a sergeant stepped out. Older guy, grey at the temples, broad shoulders under a winter jacket. The kind of man who'd seen enough roadside nonsense to recognize the smell of a lie before it walked up and introduced itself. He didn't reach for his gun, didn't shout orders. He just walked toward us, gaze moving over the scene with the steady calm of a man assembling a puzzle in his head. "Howard," the sergeant called toward the inspector. "What the hell's going on here?" So, that was his name. Howard. The inspector's entire body jerked at the sound of it. "Sarge, thank God, these 2 attacked me. They resisted inspection, tried to steal evidence." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "Evidence for what?" Howard stammered. "Violations, serious violations." The sergeant's gaze moved from the inspector's trembling hands to the 2 of us, to Lucille's dented fender, to the faint smoke rising from a bullet impact, and then to the patch of pavement where Howard's gun lay discarded in the dark. He didn't say a word. His mind was taking inventory. I took a slow breath and spoke carefully, evenly. "Sergeant, I have 2 recordings, audio and video. They capture his threats, his extortion attempt, his firing at me, his firing at the other driver." "Lies," Howard barked. "He's fabricating." The sergeant lifted a quieting hand. Then he looked straight into my eyes, not with hostility, with assessment. "Is that true?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "You got those recordings on you right now?" "Yes." Howard lunged forward like a desperate man, reaching for the last lifeline he'd ever get. Sarge, The sergeant snapped. "Howard, shut your damn mouth." The silence that followed was thick, heavy, cold. Howard blinked, stunned. "What?" I said, "Shut up." The sergeant turned fully toward him. "You fired your weapon. You discharged multiple rounds on state property. According to dispatch, there were 3 reports of gunshots from the highway before we even got here, and you didn't call it in." Howard's mouth twitched. "Sarge, I didn't have time." "Oh, you had time," the sergeant said. "You had time to pick targets." The inspector's face drained of color. "Sir," I said gently, raising my phone, "I can play the audio." "Not here," the sergeant said sharply. "Don't risk it being destroyed or lost. Hand it over, nice and easy. Camera facing up, no sudden movements." I did exactly that. I held the phone out, screen first, letting him see the recording timer still rolling at over 40 minutes. His eyes flicked across the numbers. I could almost see the gears shifting in his head. He took it carefully, sliding it into an evidence pouch one of the officers handed him. Howard started shaking, actually shaking. "Sarge, you can't believe—" "Howard," the sergeant said, voice exhausted, "I told you when you got transferred here that you were on thin ice. 3 driver complaints in 1 month, paperwork irregularities, 2 missing way tickets. That was all clerical. And now you're telling me this man, who's calm, cooperative, and clearly terrified, somehow ambushed you, stole your weapon, and shot at your own shack for fun." Howard's mouth flapped, but no words came out. The sergeant looked at him the way a mechanic looks at an engine that's finally seized for good. "Turn around," he said. "Hands behind your back." The inspector sputtered like a clogged airline. No, you can't." "Do it." Howard didn't move. The sergeant stepped forward, grabbed the man's wrist and spun him around with the kind of efficient force that comes from years of dealing with grown men who act like children. The other trucker let out a breath he'd been holding for 10 minutes straight. Howard screamed, "You don't know what you're doing! You don't know who you're crossing!" But the sergeant ignored him. "Howard Thompson, you're under arrest pending investigation of unlawful discharge of a firearm, attempted assault with a deadly weapon, and suspected extortion of drivers on state property." He shoved him gently toward the patrol car. Howard snarled, "This isn't over!" And I leaned in just enough so he could see my face. "No," I said quietly, "it's not." Because the truth was, stopping Howard was just the first step, because men like him don't get that bold alone. Someone gave him that power. Someone protected him. Someone let him turn that way station into a hunting ground, and before this was over, I was going to find out who. The way station grew quiet once Howard was in the back of the patrol car, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that settles. It was the kind that holds its breath, like the road itself was waiting to see what I'd do next. The sirens faded, replaced by the low rumble of engines idling and the clipped murmurs of officers trying to make sense of what happened. The other trucker, still shaken, walked toward me with slow steps, his face pale in the flickering floodlights. "You all right?" he asked. "Not sure yet," I said, brushing dirt off my jacket. "You?" He nodded, though the tremor in his hand said otherwise. "Never seen anything like that. Thought way stations were boring." "You picked the wrong one tonight," I muttered. We both turned as the sergeant approached. He had the evidence pouch with my phone in one hand and Howard's confiscated gun in the other. He wasn't smiling, wasn't looking proud of what he'd done. He looked tired, like this was the beginning of a long storm he'd hoped would never reach him. "We're gonna need statements," he said, "detailed ones." "Happy to give 'em," I replied, "but I want to know something first." "What's that?" "Howard. He talked like he wasn't acting alone." I watched the sergeant carefully. Talked like someone higher up kept him safe. The sergeant didn't flinch, but something tightened in his jaw. A tiny reaction, but enough to confirm everything I'd guessed. "Just write your statement," he said. "Let the investigation do its job." "Sergeant," I said quietly, "I've been on the road long enough to know what 'let the investigation handle it' really means. It means someone's hoping the heat fades before the truth catches up." He didn't deny it, Didn't confirm it either. Just said, "We'll talk soon," and walked off to give orders to his officers. The other trucker leaned close. "Think he's part of it?" "No," I said, "but he knows who is." The officers photographed the bullet impacts, took measurements, bagged spent casings, and searched the shack. When they carried out the lockbox Howard had opened, the one filled with pre-signed citations, the sergeant swore under his breath. That was the first real sign that this case was bigger than one crooked inspector. Then, like a cold snap rolling down a mountain, I realized something. They didn't have the digital recorder, the first one, the one Howard tried to grab, the one with the driver's voice, the bait he used to break people. It had slid under the desk earlier, and now no one had pulled it out. I walked back to the shack, stepping around shattered glass and bullet casings. The door hung crooked on one hinge. I ducked past it and scanned the floor. The desk was dented from the scuffle. Papers were scattered. A coffee mug lay shattered, but the recorder, Howard's trophy, was still wedged behind a fallen chair leg. I crouched and picked it up. Still intact. Still loaded. I clicked play. That trembling driver's voice filled the empty shack again. I paid, "Just please let me go." My throat tightened. That man had been scared, broken, helpless under Howard's thumb, and based on how practiced Howard was, that voice wasn't the only one on this device. I rewound. Played the earlier segments. There were 5 different drivers, 5 voices, 5 confessions squeezed out with threats, lies, and fake violations, each clip stamped with dates going back months, maybe longer. This wasn't extortion. This was policy, Howard's policy, and someone above him had let it happen. I stepped out of the shack and walked toward the sergeant. He noticed the recorder in my hand and frowned. "We didn't log that yet." "You didn't know it existed," I said. "Howard kept it hidden." He took it, weighing it in his hand like it was an unexploded grenade. "This is bad," he muttered. "Yeah," I said. "And you already knew something was wrong here, didn't you?" His shoulders sagged. There were rumors, whispers, complaint files that suddenly went missing, disciplinary actions overturned without explanation. But we never had proof. "Well," I said, "now you do." He put the recorder into the evidence pouch carefully. "This goes straight to internal affairs." "Good," I said, "but I'm not done." He raised an eyebrow. "Not done with what?" "With whoever let this happen." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Driver, you did your job tonight. Hell, you did more than your job. But you're stepping into something big, political, bureaucratic, dangerous." "Sergeant," I said, "when a man threatens my CDL, he's threatening my entire life. And when he threatens another trucker's, he's picking a fight with all of us." For a moment, he just studied me, the beat-up driver standing under dying floodlights beside a truck older than some rookies on the road. Then he nodded. "Internal Affairs will want you in Cheyenne," he said. "Proper hearing, official testimony." "When?" "Morning." I checked my watch. It was barely past 1 a.m. "Guess I'm not sleeping tonight," I muttered. The other trucker laughed once, shaky. "Ain't no way I'm going home after this either." The sergeant clapped my shoulder. "You did good, driver. You did real good." But as I watched Howard being driven away, yelling, thrashing, still promising revenge, I knew the night was only the opening act. The real battle waited in Cheyenne. I followed the patrol cars west, Lucille rumbling steady beneath me. The Wyoming night stretched wide and empty, sky clear and sharp as a blade. Sometimes long drives feel like meditation. Not that night. My mind was racing with every word Howard had said, every threat, every name he almost mentioned but didn't. This wasn't just a rogue officer going off the rails. This was a system that had grown mold behind its walls, rot behind its paperwork. I thought about that trembling driver on the recording. Whoever he was, he'd paid Howard to keep a false violation off his record. How many others had done the same? How many had their CDLs threatened, ruined, or suspended because they couldn't fight back? I wasn't going to let it stay buried. Not anymore. By the time we rolled into Cheyenne, dawn was just brushing the horizon in thin grey strokes. The state government complex sat quiet, windows reflecting the cold morning light. I parked Lucille in a visitor lot and walked toward the entrance with a stiff back and sore shoulders. Officers met me inside, directing me to a conference room where the walls were too white and the air too still. Internal affairs agents arrived within minutes, 2 men and a woman, all dressed in dark suits, all carrying clipboards and tablets. They introduced themselves, but their names slid past me like rainwater. I only cared about one thing, telling the truth. Every gritty detail of it. They started with basic questions, then deeper ones. Then they played segments from my phone recording, pausing after each threat Howard made. They listened to the other recorder, Howard's collection of victimized drivers, and the room changed. The air got tighter. The woman's hands shook just slightly as she typed notes. One of the men cursed under his breath. They weren't expecting something this big. "You understand," one said slowly, "that this recorder alone implicates not just him, but potentially supervisors who signed off on these citations." "He mentioned people above him," I said, "people who looked the other way." We'll find out who they are." "Good," I said, "but there's more." They looked up. "The scale readings," I explained. "The equipment wasn't just malfunctioning. It was tampered with. Flickering like someone wanted plausible deniability. And the whole shack looked like a bunker, not a state facility. That's not neglect, it's cover." They exchanged glances. The woman wrote another note. Then the sergeant from the night before stepped in. He carried a folder under one arm. "We searched the shack," he said. "Found blank citations, as you know, but we also found calibration logs, real ones. And they've been altered. How badly? Badly enough that Howard hasn't been weighing trucks legally for months." The agents stiffened. One muttered, "This is systemic." I nodded. "Exactly." They asked me to recount the entire event again, start to finish. They asked the other trucker too, brought him into another room. Pieced our testimonies together like matching halves of a broken map. Hours passed. The morning sun climbed higher. Coffee appeared on the table. Then sandwiches. Then more stacks of paperwork. Finally, the lead agent said, "You'll testify at the state DOT hearing. Today." "Today?" I blinked. "You move fast." "We have to," he said. "If this goes public before we're ready, evidence could disappear." I shook my head. "You're assuming the people above Howard don't already know." He paused. "What do you mean?" "We're in Cheyenne," I said. "Word travels fast in small departments. Howard's arrest is going to set off alarms. If someone protected him, that someone is panicking right now." The room went silent. Then the agent said, "All the more reason to move." The hearing room wasn't what I expected. There were rows of wooden chairs, a long table up front, and a raised dais where 3 officials sat, looking like judges in a western with fluorescent lighting. Reporters weren't allowed. The investigation was sealed, but the tension in the air felt public enough. Howard was brought in wearing handcuffs, looking smaller than he had the night before. Less swagger, more desperation. When he saw me, he glared with a kind of hatred that settled into my bones like winter frost. The panel opened, with questions for him. He lied, through his teeth. He talked about fabricated assaults, imagined threats, made-up violations. He talked like I'd ambushed him, like I'd planned the whole thing. Then they played my recordings. His voice, cold, venomous, threatening, filled the room. And Howard broke. Not physically, not immediately, but piece by piece, as the truth pulled him apart. His shoulders slumped, his jaw trembled, his lies started contradicting each other. Then they played the other recorder. The voices of the drivers, those scared, desperate men pleading for mercy they should never have needed to beg for. And when the panel demanded names, who else knew? Who let this happen? Howard tried to stay loyal, but corrupt men rarely stay loyal when the spotlight hits. He cracked. He named 2 supervisors, named a regional director, named the inspector who'd trained him to run discretionary enforcement, named the deputy who'd helped wipe complaint files. The panelists' faces hardened like carved stone. One said, "This hearing will result in full suspension of the station pending investigation." Another said, "This is criminal." Howard finally looked at me, eyes wild, face pale. You're the reason they're coming after me, the reason everything's falling apart. I stared right back. No, you did that yourself. And for the first time, he believed it. When the hearing ended, the agents shook my hand. The sergeant thanked me again. The other trucker clapped my shoulder and said, "You saved us all, man." No, but the biggest moment came later that afternoon, when I drove past the way station on my way out of town. It was closed, barricades across the entrance, caution tape around the shack, state-issued locks on the doors. Dead quiet. A place that once preyed on drivers now stood stripped and hollow, waiting for whatever justice would come next. I slowed Lucille to a crawl, watching the wind tug at the caution tape. The road hummed under my tires, steady and true. "You did good, girl," I murmured, patting the dashboard. "Real good." Then I flicked on the radio, merged back onto the highway, and let the long road carry me toward the horizon. But before the story ends, driver to driver, I'll leave folks with this. If you want more true stories about life on the road, about justice catching up to the ones who think they're untouchable, go on and subscribe. Not just because it helps the channel grow, but because out here, the truth needs every voice it can get. And sometimes, the highway bites back.